The first thing they noticed wasn't her face or her voice. It was the way she held the stick. Commander Zara Phoenix, Blackwood's hands moved across the FA-18F Super Hornet's controls with a fluidity that made 20-year veterans pause mid-conversation. But in the briefing room at Naval Air Station Oceana, all they saw was a woman in a perfectly pressed flight suit who didn't belong. The morning of September 15th started like any other training exercise, except for the encrypted message that had arrived at 3:47 hours. Priority Alpha. Eyes only. The kind of communication that made seasoned officers check their coffee twice and wonder what Washington knew that they didn't. Captain Marcus Hammer Rodriguez, squadron leader of the VFA 143 Pukin Dogs, had read the orders 3 times before believing them. "We're getting a new pilot," he'd announced to his team of 12 naval aviators, each carrying enough combat hours to fill a novel, temporary assignment, some kind of evaluation. What he didn't say, what the classified brief made crystal clear, was that this wasn't just any pilot. This was someone the Pentagon brass wanted tested under combat conditions. Someone whose real identity was buried under so many redacted lines that even Rodriguez's security clearance couldn't penetrate the mystery. The woman walking toward their hangar carried credentials that made admirals return phone calls, yet her file read like a ghost story written in government ink. Blackwood's footsteps echoed against the polished concrete as she approached the circle of aviators. The September Virginia heat shimmered off the tarmac behind her, creating an almost ethereal backdrop as she moved between the massive gray forms of $18 million aircraft. Her dark skin caught the morning light, and something in her eyes suggested she'd seen things that would make grown men reconsider their career choices. "Phoenix reporting for duty, sir," she said, her voice carrying just enough southern warmth to remind everyone that steel could be forged in Georgia clay. Rodriguez studied her face, searching for tells. Fighter pilots were walking egos wrapped in Nomex and bravado. It came with the territory of landing on aircraft carriers in 30-foot seas. But Phoenix stood differently. Relaxed, centered, like someone who'd already survived whatever judgment this room might render. "Welcome aboard, Phoenix," Rodriguez replied, though his tone carried the weight of unspoken questions. "Hope you're ready to fly with the big dogs." She smiled then, and something flickered behind her expression. Not arrogance, but knowledge. The kind of quiet confidence that comes from owning something valuable that nobody else in the room could even comprehend. In 3 hours, they'd all understand why Admiral Patricia Chen had personally signed the orders that brought Phoenix to Virginia. But for now, the mystery hung in the air like jet fuel vapor, invisible and potentially explosive. The morning briefing would change everything they thought they knew about flying, fighting, and following orders. But first, Phoenix had to prove she belonged in a cockpit where failure meant more than a damaged ego. It meant never coming home. Lieutenant Kai Viper Thompson was the first to break the unofficial starring contest that had developed around the new arrival. 6'2", with the kind of broad shoulders that made flight suits look like formal wear, Viper had earned his reputation during 2 deployments over Syria, where his aggressive flying style had saved 3 downed pilots and earned him a Distinguished Flying Cross. "So, Phoenix," Viper said, crossing his arms with deliberate casualness, "heard you got some special orders from upstairs. What's your story?" The question hung in the recycled air of the briefing room like a challenge thrown at someone's feet. 11 other aviators shifted almost imperceptibly, their body language broadcasting the unspoken hierarchy that governed every military unit. New pilots earned respect through performance, not paperwork, regardless of what admirals signed. Phoenix tilted her head slightly, studying Viper with the same detached interest a chess master might show when observing an opponent's opening move. 2,200 flight hours, mostly single-seat fighters, some classified work overseas. Her voice remained steady, professional. "Looking forward to flying with your squadron." The response was tactically perfect, enough information to acknowledge the question without revealing anything meaningful. But Thompson pressed forward, sensing weakness where none existed. 2,200 hours. His laugh carried just enough edge to remind everyone who belonged here and who didn't. Hell, Rodriguez has got 4,000. I've got 3,100 myself. You sure you're in the right hangar, sweetheart? The word sweetheart dropped like a brick through glass. Several aviators winced visibly, understanding that Thompson had just crossed a line that would define this encounter. Phoenix's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her posture, a subtle adjustment that suggested she'd been waiting for this exact moment. "Quite sure," she replied, her Georgia accent becoming more pronounced, "though I appreciate the concern for my navigation skills." Lieutenant Commander Jessica Raptor Singh, the squadron's only other female pilot, watched the exchange with professional interest. She'd endured her own share of proving ground moments, though something about Phoenix suggested a different category of experience entirely. The way she stood, the controlled rhythm of her breathing, the manner in which her eyes catalogued every person in the room, this wasn't just another pilot adjusting to a new squadron. Rodriguez intervened before the testosterone could escalate further. "All right, enough chatter. We've got a training exercise scheduled for 1,400 hours. Phoenix, you'll be flying with Raptor as your wingman until you're familiar with our procedures." The announcement drew subtle nods of approval. Singh was known for her precision flying and tactical intelligence. If Phoenix could keep pace with Raptor, she might earn grudging respect from the rest of the unit. If she couldn't, the conversation would be mercifully brief. But as Phoenix accepted her flight assignment with a simple nod, none of them noticed the small detail that would later become significant. The way her fingers unconsciously traced the outline of something in her flight suit pocket. Something that felt like a business card, though no business card had ever been printed on paper that expensive or carried information that explosive. Outside, the Virginia morning continued its relentless advance toward afternoon, and with it, the moment when Phoenix would finally show them what 2,200 hours really meant. The brief walk to the aircraft revealed more about Phoenix than an hour of conversation might have accomplished. While other pilots moved with the controlled swagger that marked successful fighter jocks, Phoenix walked like someone who'd learned to be invisible when necessary. Her steps made minimal sound against the tarmac, and her eyes constantly swept the environment, not nervously, but with the systematic awareness of someone trained to notice threats before they materialized. Raptor fell into step beside her, adjusting her helmet bag and studying the new pilot peripherally. "Don't let Thompson get under your skin," she said quietly. "He's actually a decent stick when he's not trying to prove something, but he's got issues with authority that doesn't look like him." "Noted," Phoenix replied, though her tone suggested Thompson's opinions ranked somewhere below weather reports in terms of personal importance. They approached their assigned aircraft, two FA-18F Super Hornets sitting side by side like metallic predators basking in the afternoon sun. The jets represented 40 years of aeronautical evolution, each one capable of speeds exceeding Mach 1.8 and carrying enough ordnance to level city blocks. To most people, they were symbols of American air power. To Phoenix, they were familiar tools, extensions of her will translated through hydraulics and turbofan engines. The ground crew chief, a weathered petty officer named Santos, handed Phoenix her pre-flight checklist with professional courtesy. "She's fueled and armed for the exercise, ma'am. Weapons are training rounds only, but the radar and countermeasures are fully operational." Phoenix accepted the clipboard and began her external inspection with methodical thoroughness. Her hands traced the aircraft's surfaces, checking control surfaces, intake guards, and weapon stations with movements that suggested intimate familiarity with the platform. Every gesture was economical, purposeful, betraying years of experience compressed into muscle memory. Raptor watched from beside her own aircraft, noting details. The way Phoenix examined the engine intakes, how she tested the control surfaces with just enough pressure to verify movement without stressing the hydraulics. The manner in which she inspected the AIM-120 training missiles, checking seeker heads and guidance fins with the focused attention of someone who'd seen what happened when weapon systems failed at critical moments. "You've flown Super Hornets before," Raptor observed. It wasn't a question. "Some," Phoenix replied, continuing her inspection without pause. The answer was maddeningly nonspecific, though Raptor noted that Phoenix's pre-flight procedure followed the checklist perfectly while incorporating small modifications that suggested considerable experience with the platform. Most pilots fresh to a squadron would reference their written procedures frequently, double-checking items they'd performed hundreds of times in other aircraft. Phoenix moved like someone who'd internalized every system, every potential failure point, every subtle difference between book knowledge and operational reality. 20 minutes later, both pilots were strapped into their respective cockpits, running through startup sequences that would soon fill the Virginia sky with enough sound to wake sleeping dogs 3 miles away. Phoenix's hands moved across switches and displays with balletic precision, her breathing controlled and steady as 40,000 pounds of aircraft came alive around her. In the background, barely audible over radio chatter and engine noise, her flight suit pockets seemed to whisper with secrets that would reshape everything they thought they knew about money, power, and who really controlled the chess pieces on the global board. The Super Hornet's twin F414 engines spooled up with a sound that transformed mechanical engineering into something approaching music. Phoenix felt the familiar sensation of enormous power waiting to be unleashed, 44,000 pounds of thrust, contained by nothing more than her decisions and the laws of physics. The aircraft trembled slightly against the wheel chocks, eager to trade concrete for sky. Tower, Pukin dogflight, requesting taxi clearance for training area Whiskey 291. Raptor's voice crackled through the radio, professional and crisp. Pukin dogflight, cleared to taxi runway 23, winds 090 at 8 knots, altimeter 29907. Phoenix followed Raptor's aircraft down the taxiway, noting how the other pilot's Super Hornet moved with absolute precision. No wasted motion, no hesitation at intersections, no unnecessary engine adjustments. Raptor clearly understood that how you handled an aircraft on the ground often predicted how you'd perform when lives depended on split-second decisions. As they approached the runway threshold, Phoenix's radio crackled with Rodriguez's voice from the tower. "Phoenix, this is Hammer. You're cleared for a standard training evolution. Basic fighter maneuvers, defensive countermeasures, simulated air-to-air engagement. Raptor will be evaluating your performance for squadron integration." "Copy Hammer, Phoenix ready for evaluation." The words carried weight beyond their simple meaning. Every pilot in the squadron would study the flight recordings later, analyzing her decision-making, reaction times, and tactical awareness. In the unforgiving world of naval aviation, reputation was built or destroyed in moments like these. Tower, Pukin dogflight ready for departure. Pukin dogflight, winds light and variable, cleared for takeoff. The moment of truth arrived with trademark military efficiency. Raptor's aircraft began its takeoff roll first, afterburners painting twin columns of blue fire against the afternoon sky. Phoenix watched the jet accelerate down the runway, noting the precise moment Raptor rotated for liftoff. Not too early, not too late, but with the exact timing that marked professional competence. Her turn. Phoenix advanced the throttles smoothly, feeling the engines respond with mechanical enthusiasm. The acceleration pressed her back into the ejection seat as the Super Hornet gathered speed, runway lights blurring past her peripheral vision. At precisely the right moment, she pulled back on the stick, trading concrete for atmosphere with a grace that made the $40 million aircraft appear effortless. Climbing through 2,000 feet, Phoenix's radio came alive with approach control vectors and altitude assignments. But underneath the routine communications, she could hear something else, the subtle tension of a squadron watching one of their own evaluate a newcomer who might not belong. What they couldn't hear was the conversation happening 30 miles away, where Admiral Patricia Chen was explaining to her chief of staff why Phoenix's real name wasn't Phoenix at all, why her flight records contained gaps that corresponded to classified operations in places that didn't officially exist, and why the woman currently climbing through Virginia airspace at 400 knots had spent the previous month liquidating assets worth more than the GDP of small nations. The truth would emerge soon enough. But for now, Phoenix simply flew, letting the Super Hornet carry her toward whatever test awaited in Training Area Whiskey 291. Behind her, the coast of Virginia grew smaller, and ahead, the vast expanse of the Atlantic Ocean stretched toward horizons that held secrets worth killing for. Above the churning gray waters of the Atlantic, Phoenix's Super Hornet cut through 20,000 feet of crystalline air with the purposeful grace of an apex predator. The aircraft's radar painted a picture of empty sky ahead, though she knew Raptor was somewhere out there, positioned for the first phase of their evaluation exercise. Phoenix, this is Raptor. We're going to start with basic formation flying, then move to defensive maneuvers. Stay loose on the controls and show me what you've got. Copy Raptor, Phoenix ready to play. The word play carried deliberate weight. Fighter pilots who survived long careers understood that aerial combat was the deadliest game humans had ever invented, where mistakes were measured in milliseconds and consequences came at supersonic speeds. Phoenix's choice of terminology suggested either dangerous overconfidence or the kind of calm that came from experience most pilots never acquired. Raptor's Super Hornet materialized off Phoenix's left wing at precisely 500 feet separation, the morning sun reflecting off its gray surfaces like liquid metal. The sight never got old, 60 feet of cutting-edge technology suspended in empty air by nothing more than physics and pilot skill. These machines represented the pinnacle of human engineering, capable of pulling 9 times the force of gravity while delivering ordnance with surgical precision. Nice and easy, Phoenix. Show me a standard left echelon formation. Phoenix moved her aircraft with subtle control inputs, sliding her Super Hornet into position with movements so smooth they appeared almost telepathic. The jets flew as one organism, separated by mere feet at 350 knots, their positions maintained through tiny adjustments that demonstrated either exceptional skill or extraordinary luck. Raptor keyed her radio with grudging appreciation. Good positioning. Now let's see how you handle some real flying. Break left on my call and defend against a simulated missile attack. The exercise escalated with military precision. Raptor's aircraft suddenly banked hard right, simulating an adversary's attack vector, while Phoenix reacted with defensive maneuvers that pushed both pilots deep into their seats. The Super Hornets twisted through three-dimensional space, pulling G-forces that compressed blood vessels and tested the limits of human physiology. But something was different about Phoenix's flying. Where most pilots demonstrated competence through aggressive maneuvering and textbook procedures, Phoenix flew with an economy of motion that suggested deep understanding rather than mere training. Her defensive patterns weren't copied from manuals. They were innovations, modifications that improved standard tactics in ways that would make instructors rewrite curriculum. Jesus, Raptor muttered over the intercom, watching Phoenix's aircraft perform a defensive spiral that should have been impossible at their current airspeed and altitude. Where the hell did you learn to fly like that? Phoenix's response came through steady breathing, as if she were discussing weather patterns rather than executing maneuvers that pushed both aircraft beyond normal operating parameters. Here and there. Below them, the Atlantic Ocean stretched toward Europe, its surface marked by whitecaps that looked like scattered diamonds from 20,000 feet. Neither pilot could have imagined that the woman in the lead aircraft owned a private island in those same waters, or that her bank accounts contained enough zeros to purchase small countries. The evaluation continued, but something fundamental had shifted in the dynamic between the two pilots. 25 miles southeast of their position, a Lowe's Angels-class attack submarine tracked their progress through passive sonar, its crew unaware that their routine training patrol had just intersected with something that would redefine their understanding of military hierarchy. The submarine's commanding officer, Commander David "Shark" Williams, studied the sonar displays with professional interest, noting the unique acoustic signatures of Super Hornet engines at high altitude. What Williams couldn't have known was that Phoenix's real name was Zara Akaffer, that she'd built a technology empire worth $4 billion before her 30th birthday, and that her current military assignment was voluntary, a cover story that allowed her to personally investigate security breaches in the Navy's most classified programs. Raptor Phoenix requests permission to demonstrate advanced countermeasures. The radio transmission carried an undertone that made Singh reconsider everything she thought she knew about her temporary wingman. Advanced countermeasures weren't typically part of standard evaluations, and requesting permission suggested Phoenix knew things that weren't covered in normal training curricula. Phoenix, clarify your request. What specific countermeasures are you referring to? The pause that followed lasted exactly 3 seconds, long enough to suggest Phoenix was choosing her words carefully, short enough to maintain the exercise's momentum. When she responded, her voice carried a subtle authority that made Singh unconsciously straighten in her ejection seat. Electronic warfare procedures, Raptor. Some techniques that might be useful for squadron tactical development. The phrase tactical development was interesting. Most pilots focused on personal performance during evaluations, seeking to prove individual competence rather than contribute to unit capabilities. Phoenix's suggestion implied a broader perspective, someone thinking beyond immediate approval toward long-term operational effectiveness. Singh made a command decision that would later be analyzed in classified after-action reports. Phoenix, you're cleared for demonstration. Show me what you've got. What happened next would be discussed in hushed conversations among naval aviators for years afterward. Phoenix's Super Hornet began emitting electronic signatures that shouldn't have been possible with standard aircraft systems. Her radar warning receiver painted threat displays that suggested simulated enemy aircraft at multiple vectors, while her countermeasures system deployed chaff and flare patterns that created false targets across a 20-mile radius. But the most impressive aspect wasn't the technology. It was Phoenix's integration of electronic warfare with tactical maneuvering. She flew through her own countermeasures like someone who understood not just how the systems worked, but how to exploit their effects for maximum tactical advantage. Phoenix, how are you generating those signatures? Singh's voice carried professional amazement mixed with growing suspicion. Modified software, Raptor. Some improvements to standard U suites. The answer was technically accurate while revealing nothing about the source of those modifications. Phoenix flew through another series of defensive patterns, her aircraft seeming to bend the laws of physics as she demonstrated maneuvers that combined traditional fighter tactics with electronic warfare techniques that weren't supposed to exist. Below them, Commander Williams noted unusual electromagnetic activity on his submarine sensors, patterns that didn't match any known aircraft systems in the Navy's inventory. He made a mental note to include the observations in his patrol report, unaware that his notation would eventually reach intelligence analysts who would recognize the signatures as belonging to classified programs that officially didn't exist. The training exercise continued, but both pilots now understood they were participating in something beyond routine evaluation. Rodriguez watched the training exercise through binoculars from the air traffic control tower, his expression growing more thoughtful with each passing minute. 27 years of naval aviation had taught him to recognize exceptional flying when he saw it, and Phoenix was demonstrating capabilities that challenged his understanding of what was possible with standard Navy aircraft. "Hammer, you seeing this?" Chief Master Sergeant Elena Vasquez spoke quietly beside him, her own binoculars tracking the two aircraft as they performed maneuvers that pushed the boundaries of published performance parameters. "I'm seeing it," Rodriguez replied, though his voice carried the weight of someone trying to process information that didn't fit established categories. "Question is what we're actually looking at." Through their binoculars, Phoenix's Super Hornet appeared to be performing aerial ballet at 400 knots, flowing through attack and defense patterns with a fluidity that suggested either superhuman reflexes or access to flight systems that hadn't been briefed to squadron commanders. The aircraft moved through three-dimensional space like water finding its level, natural and inevitable. Rodriguez keyed his radio. "Raptor Hammer, how's our new pilot performing?" The response took longer than normal flight communications warranted, suggesting Singh was choosing her words with unusual care. "Hammer, Phoenix is exceptional. Request extension of training time to fully evaluate capabilities." The pause before exceptional spoke volumes. Singh wasn't easily impressed, and her request for extended evaluation time implied she'd encountered something beyond the parameters of standard pilot assessment. Rodriguez granted the extension while privately wondering what his afternoon reports to Admiral Chen would contain. 300 miles away, in a nondescript office building in Rosslyn, Virginia, a team of analysts watched real-time telemetry from Phoenix's aircraft through classified channels that shouldn't have existed. The woman known to them as Subject Indigo was performing exactly as predicted, though their predictions had been based on theoretical models rather than empirical observation. Dr. Amanda Reeves, the program's civilian oversight coordinator, studied multiple display screens that showed aircraft position, pilot biometrics, and electronic warfare emissions, with the focused intensity of someone whose career depended on successful outcomes. "Physiological indicators remain within normal parameters," reported Technical Sergeant Kevin Park, monitoring Phoenix's suit sensors. "Heart rate steady at 68 beats per minute, blood pressure normal, stress indicators minimal." The readings were remarkable primarily for their unremarkable nature. Most pilots, even experienced ones, showed elevated stress responses during evaluation flights with new squadrons. Phoenix's biometrics suggested someone completely comfortable with high-performance aircraft operations, as if flying supersonic fighters was as natural as driving to the grocery store. "Electronic warfare performance?" Reeves asked. "Exceeding all models," Park replied. "She's implementing modifications that weren't in the briefing materials. Either she's improvising beyond the scope of her training, or—" He didn't finish the sentence, but everyone in the room understood the implication. Phoenix wasn't just demonstrating competence. She was revealing capabilities that suggested access to classified technology or training that wasn't documented in her official records. Back over the Atlantic, Phoenix executed a vertical climb that transitioned into an inverted dive, her aircraft's engine screaming through thin air as she demonstrated energy management techniques that belonged in advanced fighter weapons school curricula rather than routine squadron evaluations. Raptor followed the maneuver with professional difficulty, pushing her own aircraft to maintain visual contact with Phoenix's increasingly aggressive flight profile. The woman was flying like someone who'd graduated from every advanced course the Navy offered, then invented a few more for personal entertainment. "Phoenix, where exactly did you say you learned to fly?" The question carried undertones of respect mixed with growing curiosity about what kind of pilot the Pentagon had temporarily assigned to their squadron. The answer would come soon enough, though the full truth would take another 18 parts to reveal completely. "Raptor Phoenix, let's take this up to Angels 30 and see what these birds can really do." The suggestion to climb to 30,000 feet transformed their training exercise from routine evaluation into something approaching actual combat maneuvering. At that altitude, the Super Hornets would be operating in an environment where mistakes had immediate consequences and recovery options diminished rapidly. Raptor hesitated for exactly 2 seconds before responding, long enough to consider the implications, short enough to maintain operational momentum. Phoenix, confirm you're requesting climb to flight level 300 for continued evaluation. Affirmative, Raptor, unless you'd prefer to keep this party at the kiddie table. The challenge was delivered with such casual confidence that Singh found herself grinning despite the obvious provocation. Phoenix wasn't just suggesting they climb higher. She was essentially calling out the entire squadron's willingness to push beyond comfort zones. Hammer Raptor, request clearance for climb to Angels 30 for extended tactical evaluation. Rodriguez's voice came back immediately, carrying curiosity and something approaching approval. Raptor, cleared to Angels 30. Be advised, we'll be monitoring closely. The climb began with both aircraft pointing their noses skyward, afterburners engaged, trading airspeed for altitude in a contest between gravity and engineering that had fascinated humans since the Wright brothers first left the ground. At 30,000 feet, the sky transformed from blue to deep violet, and the curvature of the Earth became visible at the horizons. Phoenix's aircraft reached altitude first, despite initiating the climb several seconds after Raptor. The performance difference was subtle but noticeable, exactly the kind of detail that would be analyzed frame by frame in post-flight debriefings. Raptor Phoenix, ready for some real flying. Before Singh could respond, Phoenix's Super Hornet rolled inverted and pulled into a vertical dive that defied several established safety protocols while remaining technically within the boundaries of aircraft operating limitations. The maneuver was audacious, precise, and completely unnecessary for any evaluation exercise, which meant it was a demonstration. Singh followed, though every instinct told her that Phoenix was operating beyond the normal parameters of squadron evaluation flights. The woman was flying like someone proving a point rather than seeking approval, and the distinction was becoming increasingly significant. At 15,000 feet, Phoenix recovered from her dive and immediately transitioned into a high-G barrel roll that showcased energy management techniques that belonged in the syllabi of elite fighter weapons schools. Her aircraft moved through the maneuver with mechanical precision, maintaining airspeed and altitude while executing barrel rolls that would have challenged pilots with twice her official flight hours. Phoenix, that was impressive, Singh transmitted, though her tone carried undertones of professional concern. Where exactly did you learn energy management like that? The question struck at the heart of what made Phoenix different from other pilots. Standard naval aviation training produced competent aviators who could execute established procedures under various conditions. But Phoenix flew like someone who'd internalized principles rather than memorized techniques, adapting fundamental concepts to create new solutions in real time. Various places, Phoenix replied, her voice maintaining the same casual tone she'd used to discuss weather conditions. You pick things up. The non-answer was becoming a pattern, though Singh noted that Phoenix's evasiveness felt less like secrecy and more like someone accustomed to compartmentalizing information. Military personnel learned early to share details on a need-to-know basis, but Phoenix operated at a level that suggested her normal security protocols exceeded standard classification boundaries. Their radio crackled with a new voice, Thompson, monitoring their progress from the ground. Phoenix, Viper, nice flying for someone with only 2,200 hours. The comment carried enough sarcasm to suggest Thompson remained unconvinced, though the fact that he'd bothered to monitor their exercise indicated growing interest in Phoenix's actual capabilities rather than her official credentials. Phoenix's response would set the tone for everything that followed. Copy, Viper, still learning. The reply was perfect in its simplicity, acknowledging Thompson's implied criticism while deflecting any ego-driven escalation. But Phoenix's subsequent maneuver spoke louder than radio communications ever could. Her Super Hornet suddenly rolled inverted, pulled through a split-S maneuver that transitioned into a high-speed climb, then executed a tactical barrel roll that positioned her aircraft directly behind Raptor's jet in a perfect firing solution. The entire sequence took 11 seconds and demonstrated spatial awareness that bordered on supernatural. Singh's radar warning receiver immediately began broadcasting tone alerts, indicating simulated missile lock from Phoenix's aircraft. Standard procedure required defensive maneuvering to break the lock, but Singh found herself momentarily paralyzed by the precision of Phoenix's positioning. "Raptor, you're spiked," Phoenix announced calmly, using the standard terminology for being targeted by enemy radar. "Recommend immediate defensive action." The exercise had suddenly shifted from evaluation to instruction, with Phoenix demonstrating tactical concepts through practical application rather than theoretical discussion. Singh executed a hard left brake, pulling enough G-force to make her vision tunnel at the edges, while Phoenix's aircraft followed every movement with mechanical precision. For 30 seconds, both Super Hornets twisted through aerial combat maneuvers that showcased the platform's capabilities while testing pilot endurance. Singh threw everything she'd learned at the problem: defensive spirals, vertical maneuvering, chaff deployment, electronic countermeasures. But Phoenix anticipated every move with accuracy that suggested either perfect training or actual combat experience. knock it off," Singh finally called, using the standard phrase to terminate the engagement. Both aircraft immediately ceased maneuvering and established straight and level flight, though Singh's breathing remained elevated from the physical demands of high-G combat simulation. "Phoenix, that was graduate-level ACM," Singh transmitted, referring to air combat maneuvering with professional respect. "Where did you train?" This time, Phoenix's pause lasted longer before responding. "Different places, Raptor. You fly well yourself." The compliment was genuine, though it came from someone who just demonstrated superiority in every measurable category. Singh realized she'd just been schooled by a pilot whose official records suggested half her experience level, yet who flew with capabilities that exceeded most squadron commanders. Rodriguez's voice crackled through their radio. "All aircraft return to base. Phoenix, report to my office upon landing." The tone was neutral, professional, but carried undertones that suggested their afternoon conversation would involve questions that went beyond standard pilot evaluation. Rodriguez had watched enough training flights to recognize when something didn't fit established patterns. As both Super Hornets turned toward home, Phoenix allowed herself a small smile. The evaluation was proceeding exactly as planned, though the plan existed in classified documents that even Admiral Chen hadn't been fully briefed on. In 6 hours, she'd attend a dinner meeting in Washington, D.C., where her other identity would negotiate defense contracts worth more than the annual budget of entire military branches. But for now, she was simply Phoenix, flying home through Virginia airspace while ground control guided her toward a landing that would begin the next phase of a much larger operation. The landing pattern at Naval Air Station Oceana unfolded with the choreographed precision that marked professional military aviation. Phoenix followed Raptor through the approach sequence, their Super Hornets descending toward the runway in perfect formation, while air traffic controllers managed the complex dance of military aircraft returning from various training evolutions. Tower Pukin dogflight, requesting approach clearance. Pukin dogflight cleared for approach runway 23, winds 080 at 12 knots, visibility unlimited. Phoenix watched Raptor's aircraft touch down first, noting how Singh managed the landing with textbook precision. Main gear contact followed by nose gear, speed brakes deployed, tailhook dragging against concrete in a shower of sparks that marked successful carrier-style landings. The technique was unnecessarily dramatic for shore-based operations, but it maintained proficiency for shipboard deployments, where precision meant the difference between successful recovery and catastrophic deck accidents. Her own landing followed the same pattern, though ground observers noted subtle differences in Phoenix's approach profile. Where most pilots demonstrated competence through careful adherence to established procedures, Phoenix flew with modifications that improved upon standard techniques while remaining within safety parameters. The aircraft rolled to a stop at their assigned parking spots, engines winding down with the distinctive whine of turbofan blades returning to idle. Ground crews moved forward with practiced efficiency, conducting post-flight inspections and securing the jets for their next missions. Phoenix climbed down from her cockpit with movements that suggested the high-G maneuvering hadn't affected her physical condition. Most pilots showed some fatigue after aggressive aerial combat training, but she appeared completely unaffected by stress that would have exhausted less experienced aviators. "Hell of a flight," Singh said, approaching with her helmet under one arm and an expression that mixed professional respect with growing curiosity. "You've definitely got some skills that aren't in the standard training pipeline." "Appreciate that, Raptor. You're not bad yourself." The compliment was delivered with such casual sincerity that Singh found herself wondering whether she'd just been evaluated rather than conducting an evaluation. The dynamic had shifted subtly, but definitely during their time in the air. Rodriguez approached from the hangar, his expression unreadable but carrying the focused intensity that marked senior officers who'd encountered something requiring careful analysis. "Phoenix, if you don't mind, I'd like to debrief in my office. Won't take long." "Of course, sir." The walk to Rodriguez's office took them through corridors lined with photographs of previous squadron members, their faces frozen in moments of triumph and memory. Awards, commendations, and memorial plaques created a visual history of American naval aviation that stretched back to World War II, when carrier operations were measured in innovation rather than technology. Rodriguez's office was Spartanly functional, metal desk, standardized chairs, and walls covered with tactical charts, flight schedules, and the accumulated paperwork that marked modern military leadership. The only personal touch was a photograph of his wife and two daughters, positioned where he could see it during the long hours that came with squadron command responsibilities. "Coffee?" Rodriguez asked, gesturing toward a machine that looked like it had survived multiple deployments. "Thank you, sir." He poured 2 cups of liquid that approximated coffee through military procurement processes, then settled behind his desk with the deliberate movements of someone preparing for a conversation that mattered. "Phoenix, I've been flying for 27 years. I've seen exceptional pilots, natural talents, and occasionally someone who makes the rest of us reconsider what's possible in a cockpit." He paused, studying her face for reactions. "Today, I watched you fly like someone with capabilities that exceed your official experience level." Phoenix accepted the statement without defensiveness or explanation, simply waiting for Rodriguez to continue. "I'm not questioning your qualifications or your orders, but I need to understand what I'm dealing with here." The moment had arrived when Phoenix would need to reveal enough truth to maintain operational security, while preserving the cover story that protected her larger mission. "Sir, some of my experience comes from classified programs that aren't documented in standard personnel files. I understand that creates complications for squadron integration." Rodriguez nodded slowly, though his expression suggested partial satisfaction with the explanation. Classified programs were common enough in military aviation that Phoenix's statement fell within believable parameters, even if it didn't explain the full scope of what he'd observed. "Fair enough, but I need to know, are you here to evaluate us or are we evaluating you?" The question struck at the heart of the situation, though Rodriguez couldn't have imagined how complex the real answer would prove to be. Phoenix was indeed evaluating the squadron, but not for the reasons anyone in the building could have suspected. Both, sir. I think you'll find the arrangement benefits everyone involved. As Phoenix spoke, her hand unconsciously moved toward her flight suit pocket, where a satellite phone had been receiving encrypted messages throughout their conversation. Messages that confirmed several defense contractors had attempted to penetrate Navy communications systems during the past week, and that her cover identity was working exactly as intended. Rodriguez studied her face for several more seconds before making a decision that would reshape his understanding of military hierarchy. All right, Phoenix, welcome to the Pukin Dogs. Try not to make the rest of us look too bad. The conversation ended with mutual respect, though neither participant fully understood what they'd just agreed to. Outside, Virginia afternoon sun continued its arc toward evening, and with it, the next phase of an operation that would test everything they thought they knew about loyalty, command, and the price of national security.